The train whistle cut through the cold and made Cole Hartley's heart jump. His hands shook inside his coat pockets. He said it was the Montana winter. Truth was, he was about to see if the woman who answered his ad for a wife was real. Juniper Crossing was no city. One depot, one store, one saloon, and then open land in every direction. Snow and pines and far mountains. It was 3 days before Christmas, 1884. The air bit hard. In his pocket lay a bundle of letters tied with cord. Nora Keene, Philadelphia, 23, orphaned. She wrote in neat lines about factory hours, black smoke, and noise that never stopped. She said she wanted sky and quiet. Cole had answered with plain truth. He told her about his one-room cabin near the mountains, his half-finished barn, his small herd. He wrote about blizzards, wolves, and days when the road closed and a person had only fire and their own thoughts for company. He promised honesty and hard work, not comfort. She wrote back that fear had never fed her. Now the train rolled in with a screech of iron. Steam wrapped the platform and blurred the lantern light. Cole watched the passenger door. Bent nose, stubble, patched coat, worn boots. A cowboy with more hope than money, that was all he was. The door swung open and a small gloved hand gripped the rail. Cole forgot to breathe. A woman stepped down in a dark blue wool dress. Her coat was thin for this country. Snow clung to her bonnet. Her boots sank into the drift. She held a worn carpet bag close. Her eyes moved over the depot, the empty street, the white fields. Then they found Cole under the lamp and stayed. Fear lived in them, but it did not run. Cole pulled off his hat and walked forward. "Miss Keene," he said. His voice came out rough. She swallowed. "Mr. Hartley." Her words carried the sound of brick and stone streets. "Yes, ma'am." He reached for the trunk the conductor set down, lifted it, and carried it to the wagon. When he came back, she was still standing where he left her. "Ma'am," he said, holding out his hand. She placed her gloved hand in his. Even through the layers he felt the firm grip. She stepped up into the wagon seat. When she sat beside him, the space felt tight and wide at once. Cole snapped the reins. The horses pulled them away from the depot and out into the white. The small town lights faded. Ahead, the road ran as two dark lines through the snow. They rode in silence for a time. The wheels creaked. Harness metal clicked. Snow hissed under the iron tires. Cole reached under the seat and pulled out a folded wool blanket. "You can use this," he said. "Thank you," Nora answered. She spread it over her knees and tucked it close. Then she looked out at the land. No houses, no chimneys, no smoke. Just open space and pines and sky. "It is so wide," she said quietly. "It is," Cole said. "Winter comes fast here. A storm can close this trail quick." She did not flinch. "What needs doing first, for me?" she asked. "Firewood," he said. "Water, keeping the animals alive." They rode on. A narrow creek ran beside them, dark, under broken ice. Trees grew thicker. Nora sat straight, hands folded on her carpet bag, eyes taking in every turn of the road. "Why did you write for a wife?" she asked. Cole could have said he needed help. He could have said a man should not live alone on land like this. All true. "Because I was tired of eating alone," he said, "and tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life." She turned and looked at him. She did not smile or tease. She just nodded once. "My parents died in the same winter," she said. "Same sickness. After that, I never had a room that was mine." "I am sorry," Cole said. "My father used to say sorry does not change a roof," she answered. "Work does." The road began to climb. The light grew flat and gray. The wind cut sharper. Cole shrugged out of his spare coat and held it toward her. "You will need this more than I do," he said. She hesitated just long enough to be polite, then slid her arms into it. The coat hung big on her shoulders. Soon the cabin came into view, set against a low rock wall for shelter. Smoke rose from the chimney. The barn beside it was rough but standing. 3 horses and 2 milk cows stood in the small corral with their backs to the wind. Cole stopped the team and watched Nora. He braced for disappointment. Instead, she let out a small, shaky laugh. Tears filled her eyes. She wiped them away fast. "It is real," she said. Inside, the stove had the room warm. A pot of beans sat on top. A bed stood against one wall. A narrow cot sat near the stove. A small table, 2 chairs, a shelf with flour, coffee, and a few jars. "You can take the bed," Cole said. "I will use the cot." He showed her the water bucket, the wash basin, the peg for her coat. She walked slowly around, touching the bedpost, the chair back, the window frame. By late afternoon, the light outside faded. Snow thickened, tapping on the window, then covering it. Somewhere out in the dark, a wolf called once. The long sound slipped through the walls and made the hair rise on Cole's neck. The wind picked up and pushed at the cabin. It found every small gap and sent cold through. The logs creaked. The storm changed from simple weather to something heavier. Nora watched his face. "Is it turning bad?" she asked. "It might," Cole said. "There is a rope line to the barn. If the world goes white, we use that." He took a coil of rope from its peg by the door. One end was tied to an iron ring in the wall. The rest ran out through a small hole toward the barn. He set the rope in her hands. "One hand on this," he said. "One hand on the person in front of you. If you lose either, you stop and call out." Her fingers closed around the rough line. Just then a sharp bang hit the wall from the direction of the barn. The sound cut through the wind and shook the small room. Nora's eyes jumped to the door. Cole's heart kicked once, hard. Something out there had come loose in the storm. And the night was just beginning. The bang from the barn came again, sharp over the howl of the wind. The small cabin gave a tired shiver with it. Cole knew that sound. Something out there was loose. If a board tore free, snow would pour in on the stock, and fear would do the rest. He pulled on his coat and hat. "We go now," he said. Nora was already reaching for her gloves. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. Fear sat there, but it did not move her back. Cole opened the door, and the storm hit like a fist. Wind dragged at the warm air and flung snow across the floor. Outside there was no sky and no ground, only a wild white world that wanted them gone. He grabbed the rope line tied to the iron ring by the door and gave it 2 hard pulls. It held, stretched tight toward the barn. The rough feel of it in his hand was the only sure thing he had. "Stay close," he shouted. "One hand on my belt, one on the rope. If you lose either, you stop and call out." Nora stepped behind him and hooked one gloved hand into his belt, her other hand wrapped around the rope. They stepped out, and the door slammed shut behind them. The cabin vanished into the storm. Wind shoved at Cole's chest and tried to twist him sideways. Snow stung his skin and melted down his neck. He bowed his head and moved by feel, one hand on the rope, boots hunting for the packed trail. The snow rose high and soft, hiding holes and rocks. Twice his foot slid into nothing, and he went to his knee. Each time Nora's grip on his belt jerked him back to center. He counted under his breath without knowing it. His fingers burned. His teeth hurt from the cold. The only solid things in the world were the rope and the weight of the woman behind him, who had crossed half a country to sit at his fire. Then his glove scraped wood. Relief rushed through him. He found the barn wall, slid along it to the door, and fought the frozen latch with numb hands. Nora leaned her shoulder into the boards beside him, adding her weight. The latch gave, and the door swung in. They stumbled inside and shoved it closed. The noise dropped at once, from a scream to a heavy rumble outside the walls. The air in the barn was cold, but it did not bite as deep. The horses stamped and snorted, eyes bright and wide. The cows swung their heads in the stalls, ropes pulled tight. Cole lit the lantern and lifted it high. Lights slid over rough boards and tense backs. "Easy," he said. "Easy now." He moved from horse to horse, running his hands down legs and over ribs, feeling for cuts and heat. He spoke low and steady, more for them than for himself. Nora went to the water trough and set her glove on the surface. "Ice," she said. Cole handed her the iron bar. "Straight down, in the middle." She nodded and swung. The bar rang in the cold air. Cracks ran through the ice. She swung again until dark water showed, and the cows stepped forward at once to drink. They checked the chicken coop next. The birds were piled together in straw, combs pale. Nora reached in slow, then drew her hand back with one warm egg in her palm. She stared at it like proof that something gentle had made it through the night. The banging came again, from the north wall. Cole followed the sound and found a shutter flapping, snow blowing in around it. He grabbed his hammer and nails. Nora held the board flat while he drove the metal home. Each strike shook the wood. Her grip never slipped. "You can go in," he said once. "I will not leave you half done," she answered. He gave a brief nod. He understood that. The walk back was worse. The wind had shifted and shoved from behind, driving snow down their collars, soaking into their shirts and stealing heat from their backs. Cole kept one hand on the rope and his head down. Twice he stopped and made Nora stamp her feet. He checked her cheeks and nose for white. They stayed red and raw, but not frozen. When the dark line of the door showed in the white, it felt like a gift. Inside, heat wrapped around them. Nora dropped into the nearest chair, shoulders shaking. Cole hung their wet coats and packed the stove with wood until the fire roared. He filled 2 tin cups and set one in her hands. She wrapped both hands around it and held it close to her face. Steam fogged her lashes. "I thought I knew winter," she said at last. "Montana teaches a different lesson," Cole answered. They sat close to the stove and spoke about what mattered. Wood. Water. Feed. How often to risk the rope while the storm held them. Nora listened as if each answer was a piece of ground under her feet. "We check morning, evening, and once in the night," Cole said. "Then we share the night watch," she said. He wanted to tell her no. He saw the tired in her eyes. But he also saw how she held his gaze. "We will see how your strength runs," he said instead. Near midnight the wind still screamed, and the walls creaked with each hard gust. Cole reached for his coat again. Nora pushed herself up from the chair. "I am coming," she said. Her boot caught the edge of the rug by the stove. The rug slid. Nora lurched, grabbed for the table, and her foot twisted under her with a soft, ugly sound. She did not scream. She sucked in a sharp breath and went still. Her hand clamped on the table edge until her knuckles showed white. Cole was at her side in 2 strides. "Easy now," he said. He knelt and eased her boot off, slow and careful. Her ankle was already swelling, skin hot and tight under his fingers. He pressed along the bone. She flinched and bit down on her lip. "How bad?" she asked. Her voice shook once, then went steady. "Bad enough," he said. "Could be a hard sprain. Could be worse. I will treat it like worse." He tore old cloth into strips, found a thin board, and wrapped the ankle tight, then braced it and tied it with cord. His hands stayed steady because they had to. Nora watched his face, not her foot. When he finished, she tried to stand. Pain shot up her leg. A small sound escaped before she could stop it. Her knees buckled. "That is enough," Cole said, catching her. He lifted her and carried her to the bed. He set her down gentle, raised her ankle on folded blankets, and tucked quilts around her legs. Outside, something slammed against the wall again. The wind's voice rose. The barn still needed its night check. The animals were alive now because he had kept them that way. Panic in a storm could kill as quick as cold. He looked at Nora's ankle, angry and swollen. He looked at the door. His choice stood there plain. "You keep the fire," he said at last. "You melt snow for water. You feed the stove when it drops. You do not put weight on that foot, not at all." Her eyes burned, part pain, part anger at being left. Still, she gave him one short nod. "You watch the rope," she said, "and come back mad if you must, but come back." He stood there a moment longer, not knowing where to put his hands. At last he laid his palm on the edge of the quilt near her knee. It was a small touch, but it felt like a promise spoken out loud. "I will," he said. He took the lantern, pulled on his coat and scarf, and went to the door. The wind rattled it hard. When he opened it, the cold rushed in like a flood. Cole grabbed the rope, wrapped it around his hand, and stepped back into the white. The storm closed over him at once. The rope was the only truth. Somewhere behind him, a woman he barely knew kept his fire alive. Somewhere ahead, in the dark barn, waited the stock that carried both their futures. The night was not done testing him, and Christmas was still 3 days away. Cole fought his way through the whiteout with the rope line biting into his glove. The storm had turned the night into something wild and living, clawing at him with frozen hands. The snow dragged at his legs as he pushed toward the barn. He could not feel his fingers. He could not hear anything except the roar of wind and the drum of his own heartbeat. When he finally slammed into the barn wall, he felt the rough wood like a blessing. He worked the latch with numb hands until it gave, and he stumbled inside. The sound dropped at once. The storm outside was still loud, but the barn wall softened its bite. The horses stomped and blew white into the cold air. The cows shifted, ropes taut, eyes wide with fear. Cole lit the lantern and lifted it high, its warm circle of light shaking but steady. "Easy now," he said, voice low. He moved stall to stall, checking each animal. He touched their legs, their ribs, their necks, letting them know he was there. Fear made animals foolish. His job was to be steady until they believed they were safe. He broke the ice in the water trough and forked hay where it needed to be. He checked the roof and walls again, searching for new damage. But he stayed too long. He knew it. He felt the pull of Nora back in the cabin, the pale, tight look on her face, the way she fought to sit straight in that chair though the pain was carving into her ankle. He could almost hear her breath hitch when she shifted. He could almost see her hands gripping the quilt, not wanting him to see how much it hurt. He forced himself to leave and pushed the barn doors shut behind him. The storm slammed against him as if angry he had come out alive. He wrapped the rope around his fist and leaned his whole weight into it. Snow hit sideways. Wind shoved hard enough to steal his breath. His legs shook by the time he saw the dark slash of the cabin door. Inside, heat swallowed him. The door slammed shut behind him, knocking loose snow from his coat. Nora was awake in the chair by the stove, ankle propped high. Her eyes were red with pain and worry. "You took too long," she whispered. "You kept the fire," he said, voice rough. "That's what matters." He kneels in front of her, checking her ankle again. It was worse, darker, swollen tight. He pressed gently along the edge of the brace. She flinched, then steadied herself. They settled into a rhythm after that. The storm held them for days. Morning and night, Cole followed the rope to the barn. Nora kept the cabin warm, melted snow for water, and watched the fire like it was a living thing. She cleaned beans, made coffee, and organized their supplies. Pain lived in her ankle, but she did not let it rule her. The quiet between them changed. It wasn't empty. It had weight and warmth. On the second night of the storm, Cole unrolled his bedding near the stove. Nora watched him for a long moment. "You'll freeze there," she said. "You need the bed." "It is your bed," he answered. "I can share space," she said. "You're working yourself half to death. Sleep where the heat stays." He hesitated, but she was right. He was worn to the bone. His hands cracked. His feet burned with cold. They set a long, rolled quilt between them, a boundary line. Cole lay stiff on one side, Nora still on the other. The storm pressed against the walls, and the fire cracked in the quiet. Near midnight, Nora spoke. "Cole?" He answered soft without meaning to. I'm here. Why did you really write the ad? Not the reason you think sounds right. The true one. He stared at the dark ceiling. Because the quiet was killing me, he said. Because I was lonely enough to be ashamed of it. Because a man can live a long time without dying, but that isn't the same as living. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, I was lonely in a city full of people. At least the wilderness is honest about it. The next morning came with a different sound, silence. Cole opened the shutter, and sunlight struck snow so bright it hurt. The storm had passed. Drifts climbed high around the cabin. The air was still. He saddled the strongest horse and left Nora with enough wood, water, and coffee. She tried to sit up straighter to hide the pain. He touched her cheek gently before he left. He rode toward the valley to check the herd. Snow came high up the horse's chest. The cattle were huddled near the pines, worn thin. 5 lay frozen. The loss stung deep, but there was no time to feel it long. He broke a path for the rest, pushing them toward shelter. He had just turned back when he heard the howl. Low, long, hungry. Wolves. Gray shapes moved in the tree line, coming slow and sure. Cole raised his rifle and fired a warning shot. Snow sprayed. The wolves paused but did not run. He could ride back to the cabin. He could shut the door. He could save himself. But the herd was his winter, and now it was hers too. He turned his horse toward the wolves. Then he heard the cabin door slam open. He turned, and his breath caught. Nora stood on the porch wrapped in his coat, rifle in her hands. Her injured ankle shook beneath her, but she stood anyway. Cole rode hard to reach her. You should be inside, he said, grabbing her elbow. You could fall. I won't let you face them alone, she said. He wanted to argue, but one look at her face, stubborn, scared, determined, stopped him. Watch the right corner, he said. Only shoot if one slips past me. She nodded, jaw tight. The wolves spread in a hunting line. Cole fired again, pushing the lead wolf back. They darted and tested, circling the cattle, trying to split the herd. Cole turned his horse again and again, shouting, waving, firing into the snow. A wolf broke right, too close to the cabin. Cole wasn't near enough. Nora fired. The wolf yelped and spun away. The pack hesitated. Cole's heart pounded. No more unless I tell you, he shouted. Nora nodded, bracing herself on the rail. Cole fired again into the snow, pushing the pack back step by step. At last they drifted into the trees, shadows swallowed by distance. Nora swayed. Cole leapt from the saddle and caught her before she fell. He carried her inside, heart shaking harder than his arms. He set her on the bed and worked the brace loose. Her ankle was swollen, angry, red, and hot. She clenched her jaw against the pain. You could have died, he said, voice shaking. She met his eyes. So could you. He sat heavily beside her. Nora, I can't lose you. Not after all this. Her fingers brushed his. Then don't, she whispered. Stay. He leaned in and kissed her, slow, certain. The weeks that followed were hard, but they faced them as a pair. Her ankle healed. The cattle steadied. Snow melted slow, leaving mud and work behind. They talked by the fire, planned their planting, fixed fences, and built back what winter had taken. They rode to the Hollis ranch when she was strong enough. They stood by the hearth and said their vows. It was plain and perfect. Later that spring, Cole took her up the ridge. They looked down at the cabin, the barn, the field where new grass pushed through. It looks like a life, Nora said. It is one, Cole answered, slipping his hand into hers. A wolf howled far off, lonely and thin. Cole listened a moment, then smiled. We faced worse, Nora said. Together, he answered. They walked down the ridge toward the cabin that waited warm in the valley below. Two people who had chosen each other in the dead of winter and found a future in the thaw.